Hey guys, it's Tom, and I wanted to show you guys a little project I worked on the last few days. It is a clock built on an Excel graph. So let's look at this real quick. I've got a section for minutes I've set to 23 and seconds is 5. And I'm going to go ahead and hit start clock, and you will see how the second hand is now ticking away every second, and when it rolls around to 12, it's going to tick the minute hand one position. Not like overly fantastic or crazy achievement, but I wanted to demonstrate this because there's a couple really cool things in Excel that help me make this clock. The first thing I'm demonstrating is just that a graph in Excel is really nothing but coordinates we can use and get super creative with that. In this clock simulation, I've used 3 different types of data series that have different purposes to make the whole project come together. The second thing I want to demonstrate is utilizing the application on time method. Now this is a method in Excel where you can set it to do something at a particular time or at different time intervals. In this case, obviously, we're having something run every second to increment that clock second hand. The third thing that's kind of interesting is that in order to build the clock hands, I had to use trigonometry and trig functions native in Excel to calculate where that line should point on the circle. So that's just a little bit more of advanced formula building. And then the last thing we'll do is after we have the clock together, just applying some formatting to make it come together. I mean, when we do our basics, it's gonna function at first, but really adding some extra formatting to this clock will make it kind of pop. So let's go ahead and start looking at how to get the first sheet set up. Okay, well the first thing we're going to do is build the structure of our clock. And this may be backwards because I haven't told you how to calculate where everything goes yet, but it'll make more sense when we're doing the calculations to be able to see the clock along with it. So if you're following along, get on a blank sheet. You can make 2 buttons. One says start clock and stop clock. We'll add macros to those later. Then you need a section to put the minutes and the seconds for the clock. And just put those there. And then we have these 4 other sections where we're going to have this block right here is for the second hand. This is for the minute hand. And you see how we've got X coordinates in this row and Y coordinates in the lower row. Below that, we have a section for clock numbers. These are the numbers that go around the clock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 12. And in this case, X is going to be vertical and Y is going to be vertical. Then we have a clock perimeter, which that's going to make up the outer edge of the clock, the circle around the clock, if you will. And again, those values are vertical to X and Y. So let's go ahead and just start. We're going to leave the clock up there just for a reference point if we get stuck. But we're going to build this from scratch. So now we're going to insert our graph, which is going to be a scatter plot with lines and markers. It's going to be completely blank because we're going to add those data series, all of them manually. So let's go to select data and we'll add our first series, which is going to be the second hand. So we'll click that. The X values are going to be these 2. And the Y values, we've got to delete that out and then click on these. This will be our second hand. And you see it drew the line there. Now let's add the next one. Let's do the minutes. We'll add series name is minutes. And then the X values are going to be here. And the Y values are going to be here. And click OK. So now we've got both of the hands of the clock, but it doesn't look great yet. So let's go down and add the clock numbers. Scroll down a little bit. And we're going to add the clock numbers. I'll select data and add a series. This is just going to be clock numbers. And then the X values are going to be all of these right here. And then the second set is going to be these numbers here, the Y values. All right, and we'll click OK. And you see we got some dots in the circle there. Looks pretty ugly. Don't worry, we'll fix that formatting later. And now one more we're going to add is the clock perimeter. And the X values here start at the 27th row and scroll all the way down here. And then the y values, again, we have to wipe out what's in y and then highlight those right there and click OK. And that should do it. Let me scroll up. Now, believe it or not, this is the shelf for the clock, and you can kind of see it over here. So we're going to format this a little bit, but we're going to format it a lot more later. So just a couple things we want to do is I'm going to right-click on this series, the green series, and format the data series. And so this is lines and markers. What we really need to do is get rid of the line. So no line. So that'll just be the 1, 2, 3, and we'll set that up later. The second thing we're going to do real quick is take this line and we're going to get rid of the markers here, and that'll be the outside of the clock. The last thing we're going to do, just to be consistent, is the colors are kind of opposite for minutes and seconds. So let's just change the colors here of these. I'll do my fill, and this color instead of orange is going to be blue, and then this color instead of blue is going to be the orange because that's the second hand. So we'll leave it like this for now, and then we're going to move on and learn how to calculate how to draw that second hand and minute hand and how we got all these other values. Okay, so now we're at the point where we need to do the math to figure out how to draw the hands on the clock. Just by keeping it at a high level, we have a little text area here for the number of minutes and the number of seconds we have on the clock. And you'll see if I just type in values here, 25 or 5, it moves the hands where they need to be. So at 5 seconds, the clock looks like that. 10 seconds, it's pointing to the 10. But how do we do that? So when I type in numbers here, I've got a formula down here in seconds and a formula in minutes that it converts them to an X and Y value. But what really are those, and what does that formula mean? Sine, radians, 90 minus D13 times 6. So let's talk about that a little bit. There's a couple sections here. The first one is I have to figure out how many degrees of angle equate to 1 second in time or 1 minute in time. So since I know there's 60 minutes in an hour or 60 seconds in a minute, and there's 360 degrees in a circle, then it's pretty easy. We're going to divide 360 divided by 60, and that tells us for every second or every minute, there's 6 degrees of angle in the way that line needs to be plotted. Okay? So if we look down here at our formula for seconds, what we have is D13, which is the number of seconds, times 6. Okay? Now the next thing you'll see in that formula is we've got a 90 minus D13 times 6. What's that all about? Well, this is where it gets a little tricky. In general, with a clock, you think of straight up as the 0 point. So 1 second is right here, 2 seconds, this is 5 seconds. So as you move in seconds or minutes, you're going clockwise. But when you're making angles on a circle and you have like 30 degrees, that actually starts from this point here, which is the rightmost point in the circle, and goes counterclockwise. So this would be 10 seconds, but it's also going to be 30 degrees. And it's offset by one starts at the top and one starts at the right. So basically what we had to do to make the formula work is we take 90 degrees minus however many degrees of angle are there from how many seconds times 6. So in this example, I'm at 10 seconds, so I'm right there. So 10 times 6 is 60. We want to get the angle. It's going to be 90 degrees because that's where time starts, minus 60, 30 degrees. Perfect. Okay, if you're not confused enough already, just wait. It gets better. So all this does here, all this part of the formula does here, is gives us the angle of that particular line in the circle. But we need to find the x and y coordinates for that endpoint. So luckily for us, we remember that there's something called trigonometry, and that helps you figure out distances when you have an angle. And it kind of goes something like this. If you have an angle sitting in a circle and you want to find out the horizontal distance, that's the cosine of the angle. If you want to find the vertical distance or the y value, that's going to be the sine of the angle. Okay? So if I'm here, that's really sitting at 30 degrees off of that line. So if I want to get the value for that right there, I could say equals cosine of 30 degrees, 0.15. That doesn't look right. Our x value over here is 0.779. Okay, so what's wrong? Well, the other thing about these functions is cosine and sine don't work on angles, they work on radians. And a radian is something, it's the measure of distance of an angle around the surface of a circle, or around the perimeter of a circle. There's some formula like the number of radians in circles, like 2 times pi times the radius of the circle. I'm confusing myself. So what I'm going to do is just lean on Excel for its function. I'm going to say equals radians, and then I can plug in the angle, and that will convert that number into the number of radians. And then that is what I can use in cosine. So I got 0.866025 for my x value, and it's 0.77942. Close, but not quite there. So let's see what else we need to do. Well, this is based on a circle with a radius of 1. When I drew the hands, I don't want the hands of the clock to go all the way to the edge of the circle. So I took the end result and I multiplied it by 0.9. So if I just multiplied this by 1 or left that blank, then I do get the same thing, 0.866. But I want that 0.9 there so that the hand doesn't go all the way to the end. So let's see if we can get the y value that way too. Equals radians of 30 degrees equals sine of this. And I get 0.5. And if I multiply 0.5 times 0.9, I get 0.45, which is exactly the value for y. So that's how we're going to do it. If you look at this formula all together, what we're doing is we're saying, come down here for x and y. We're going to use the seconds. And what we want to do first is get the angle of the number of seconds that we have. So this would be a 60-degree angle from the top. And subtract that from 90, so I get a 30-degree angle, which will plot that hand right to there. And then, since I have that angle, I convert it to radians. I use the cosine or the sine, and then I multiply it by 0.9. And the minute hand is even shorter. I get the angle, and then I convert it to radians, and I use cosine or sine. But this time I'm actually multiplying it by 0.7, because the minute hand should be shorter than the second hand. And if we had hours, that would be shorter too. All right, so that's how I calculate the x and y value based on the seconds and minutes. If it's 15, that goes to 0. If it's 20, that goes down there. So again, feel free to rewind this, look at the formula, play with it a little bit. But the next piece then is once I've got that logic down, then what I did for the clock numbers and the clock perimeter is that I just calculated the x and y point for each position on the clock. So this is going to be 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 15, 20, 25. So I basically just did that for all of these. And then put the numbers down here in this table so that it plots everyone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that's how we got our green dots there. The perimeter is similar too, but that time I used the cosine and sine. I multiplied that by 1.2 because I actually want this perimeter to be a little bit outside the actual clock width. So the clock width should be 1, but this edge or outer thing is going to be 1.2 times the value. So once I did the calculations, then all I had to do is add these series into the clock, and it drew all these points around here, and we'll smooth this out, and all the dots in there. All right, so next lesson is how to automate all this and put it together. Okay, everybody, now we get to the fun part, the automation part, how to make this clock hands tick every second and then roll over for a minute. And to do that, we're going to have to do a very little bit of VBA, and we have to use the application on time method. So I don't know if you've used this very often, but just go over it real quick. So the application on time method takes 4 arguments. 2 are optional that we're not going to deal with. The earliest time is the first argument, and then the procedure is the second. So for the earliest time, that's the actual time you want the procedure to run. So it's really designed to kick off things that say, you know, run this at 1:30 or 2 o'clock or 2:30 or whatever. But what we're going to do is when we use this method, we're going to add 1 second to the current time, which is now, so that we will continually schedule these events to run 1 second in the future, and that's how the clock hands will advance from 1 second to the other. The next argument is just the procedure. You just put the VBA subroutine that you want it to run in quotes, and then it will run when that time is hit. Okay? So let's look at this code. It's going to be really easy to put in. Move my VBA over here. And the first thing we have here in the module is a timer is running variable that's a Boolean. And the reason we want that is because, you know, we are going to have times where we don't have the clock running and it is running, but we're going to set that when we start the clock running so that it will run and keep incrementing the seconds. Okay, then we just have some variables for the time component. Number of seconds, number of minutes, second value is double, and earliest time is double. And I don't even know if we're using those in this iteration, but the first part of this routine is just to check if the timer's running. If it's not, just skip everything else. The next thing we're going to do is get the number of seconds. We're going to go out to the worksheet where our seconds are and put that in the seconds variable. Then we're just going to add 1 second to that. So that's simple. Then we have a little if loop that says if the seconds are greater than 60, then reset the seconds to 1. So that means if seconds got up to 61, put it back to 1. And also we're going to increment minutes. So we're saying the number of minutes equals this workbook where we're storing the minutes, add 1 to that, and then put that new value of minutes back into the workbook. That's it. Once you update those, the hands on the clock will automatically update to what they should be. And then the last thing that we're going to do, outside of the loop, if seconds are 60, we're going to put the seconds back into the seconds cell in the worksheet, and we're going to generate a brand new on-time event. These things run 1 time. So what we're happening is when we run this routine, every time we run it, we're going to set another on-time event that's 1 second in the future. So it keeps, you know, running every 1 second. And that's it for that. But then the other thing that we're going to do now is we drew the buttons earlier. What we want to do is go back up here, and in our start clock button, we're going to set the timer as running variable to true, and we're going to call that first iteration of an application on time event. We're going to set that up to run. And then when we click the stop clock button, all we're going to do is set the timer as running equal to false. So that's really it for the automation. It's pretty simple, although it looks pretty cool. All right, that's it for automating this part. Okay, well now that we've done all the clock pieces, we want to format it to make it look a little bit nicer. So what I've got here is I've got our chart we made so far next to the final formatted clock. And let's just go ahead and see how we put those finishing touches on to make it look really sharp. So again, I'll click on our graph, and I'm going to use the quick formatting tool right here under chart design, and I'll click that first one. That looks pretty good. We're going to modify some things, but for now we'll use that. Now I want to get rid of the axis and the grid line, so I can just click on each one of those elements. Here's the vertical axis, the horizontal axis, and then click on the grid lines. Horizontal grid lines and vertical grid lines. Those are all gone. Now let's do the border of the clock. So I'll click on that and right click to format that data series, and we want to go to the fill options and go to line. We're going to have a solid line. It's going to be white or slight off-white. We're going to make it wider, maybe up to like 5. And then we'll change the compound type to be this one so it matches. Almost there. You see how it's a little jaggy? We can scroll all the way to the bottom here and just click on that we want it to be a smooth line. That's it. We got that part done. Well, now let's look at the green dots, the data points there. So let's click on that data series. Got all the data series selected. We'll click on marker, and then we want to go to the marker options. It's going to be built in, that circle, and let's make the size 15. So all the markers are bigger now. So once we're there, once we've got the color there, we actually need to go down on the marker and get rid of the line. So we just have the circle there. Okay, now next thing we want to do is we want to add the data labels for the numbers. So again, I'll right click there. I'll go to add data labels. And got ones we're not really sure about. So let me scroll back a little bit, and we're going to format the data labels. And what we want is to get the data labels from a value in a series. So these numbers right here, 1 through 12, that's what we want to show on those data labels. So we'll click that, select that range, comes out 1 through 12, and click OK. Now we also have to take off the Y values and show leader lines, and then let's move it over so it's in the middle. And the last thing we need to do is make the text a little bit better. Let's take the text and make the text fill. Text fill is going to be a dark color, so we'll make it dark brown so you can see a little better. All right, so we're almost done. Now we just have to format the lines a little bit and we'll be all set. So to keep it consistent, we've got to change these colors here. So I'll click on the hour hand, which is currently orange, and over to the format data series, I want to change the fill types, and I want the line to be a solid line, but instead of orange, I want it to be kind of that bright blue. So I'll click that, make it thicker, go up to 5 points, and then I need the cap types. So the beginning arrow type is going to be this dot, and then the ending arrow type is going to be an actual arrow. And then we go over to marker and we take the fill off. We have no fill there. So now let's go to the second hand. Since we're already there, we can go to marker and have no fill. But then we want to change the color of the line. So we'll go back to line, change that color to orange, make it thicker. Then do the end caps. We want to have the starting point to be that one and the ending one to be the arrow. And that's it. That's all there is to making that clock. So I hope you guys thought this was kind of a fun exercise. Let me know what you think.